Hi, friends. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in every week. This is the attempt to ease you out of the week that was, help you ease into the week that will be, with a nice little bedtime story. A story about people, keeping with the theme. This week I brought a guest with me. His name is Ryan Lindley. He's co-host of the Dean Blundell Show on the Crier Media Network. He's also got his own show called the Lindz Report. He's also a foodie, food critic, food writer, makes food, amazing chef. And I tasked him with coming on the show today to tell a bedtime story within one of these categories, but he didn't tell me what he wanted to talk about. He just brought it in. I said, I want you to surprise me with what we want to talk about. He said, well, we're going to talk about food and travel, something that's very near and dear to my heart. Not quite as much as him because he's a foodie, but still. It's Ryan Lindley, and today, this is a story about Anthony Bourdain. Ryan Lindley, welcome to Sunday Night Storytime. How are you?
I'm great, pal. How are you?
I'm really, really good. This is the second episode in this series of Sunday nights where we're going to try to mellow people out after the week that was, the madness around the world, and then looking forward to the week ahead. We want people to be able to just kind of chill out and put some sounds and a little bedtime story into their brain before they crash for the night. And I thought, well, let's bring the soothing sounds of Mr. Lindley on to tell a story today to the people, and maybe we'll help them ease off into their week, you know?
So I shouldn't talk like Gilbert Gottfried then, is what you're saying.
I mean, you can do that at the very end and wake them all back up, kind of like I gotcha. But yeah. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever. But I will say this. There will be a selection of people on with various kinds of voices. However, in this case today, I've brought the silky sounds of you because I figured you're going to help the people ease in here. You know what I'm saying?
And now I'm completely self-conscious. So now I'm going to stutter. I'm not going to say anything proper. It's going to be great. Good job.
So the other side of this, as mentioned in the intro and as we're going through this process, is I want to have a discussion. It's a story time. It's a bedtime story. But I actually don't know what you're bringing to the table.
I thought that was kind of fun. I like that.
Yeah,
part of
this is a cool thing. I don't know what story that it is that you want to tell, but I'm hoping that I can contribute to it. But regardless, it'll be your story to tell about someone who does, someone who did, or someone who will, in keeping with the theme of the Do Did Will Story of People podcast. So, right. My friend, why don't you get us started with Sunday Night Storytime?
So you gave me the option and opened the door and said, it's up to me who we talk about. And you gave me such a long period of time to come up with something, which was, I believe, was about 45 minutes. So thanks for that.
Yes. We don't mess around. You know how it works at the network here. Let's go.
That's right. And I thought, there must be somebody that we can have a discussion about that crosses both of our interests very well, and I think would end up being good fodder for discussion. And it has to do with your passion and mine, and that would be cooking and travel.
Amazing.
Who am I thinking of?
Anthony Bourdain, potentially.
Correct. You got it. All right. I had a feeling you were going to pick it. So, and how perfect is that for a discussion between you and I, the food snob that I am, and the travel bug that you are? But
who also enjoys food, but not as much as you likely.
I would, and it's funny. I'm not even a huge food eating guy. I know it's very weird to look at me and say that guy, he likes to eat. I do. I like to taste food.
Right.
I'm not a big eater, but I do like to make it. I love cooking and I love feeding people. Right. So, and I also do love travel as well. It's just a matter of situations are different between us. Yours is for a job. Mine is not. But Anthony Bourdain covers both spectrums so well. And it started with him when he was a young lad, and his parents used to bring him to Paris, him and his siblings, and they used to go and try different foods and try different and things. And like he was saying that his I think it was his brother wasn't a big fan of trying new things, but he was the first one to, if it was weird, if it was odd, he would grab it and eat it just to like that impression, like to make an impression on his parents, almost like he was trying to impress them the entire time. And that's where his love of food came in. And he want to talk about, if you ever want to mimic or pattern yourself against somebody, I would say other than the drug addiction, I would say Anthony Bourdain's experience in life is one to be admired just due to the exposure that he had. And I've always said that the cure to any sort of stereotyping, racism, xenophobia, anything like that is travel. Go and experience the things, right? Go do the things that people do, that you have a preconceived notion of a certain country. Go and check it out. Like, see if it's true, if what you've heard is true, which is what you do, right? So, and then learn how to cook along the way, because I'll tell you, it's one of the best skills you can have in the world is learning how to cook. So
it's not easy for people to, I mean, it seems daunting. Both of them are daunting. If you don't have a job that you can travel with, then you have to save, you have to build up to this, and then you got to pick your spots. And going to Belize or potentially, one of the islands in the Mediterranean, and going to Maldives or going somewhere like that is such a daunting idea that a lot of people shut it down and they won't go there. And it's back to Cancun, and it's Florida, and it's Paris, and all great cities or great spots within themselves. But it can be daunting to have that, because you really have to plan it out, especially if you have a family and you've only got your 3 weeks a year off of work. You really have to pick your spots. So for me, I have the benefit of traveling for work, but I do get great joy out of cooking. And it's one of those things in the world that you do, and your brain generally turns off and only focuses at that time. And it's one of the only things I think in the world where you can do that. Outside of maybe somebody plays sports, they play golf, they do whatever, but cooking itself, you really got to focus on every step of the thing, because you've got to get the taste right. You got to get the, more salt, less salt, the spices. You spent 3 days getting it ready. It's a whole commitment.
You're using every single sense that you have
right
to do it. But it's really, you're right. You shut yourself. Like I put music on. I'll put something on in the background, even podcast. I'll throw a podcast on if I'm, and you zone out, right? So hearing the way he did it, and you can tell where the passion was where it was obviously from his younger days as an American in Paris, but then to move on to working as a stage in a kitchen somewhere, like just didn't care, just get me in the kitchen, let me run with it, up to the point where he was working at Leal in New York and wrote Kitchen Confidential, which later on in his life he regretted a little bit. Some of the things he had retracted some of the statements because he was a bitter chef, right? He was just a bitter guy. And I think he realized that, maybe he was being a little hasty and a little, when he was saying don't buy seafood on a Monday and making all these rules up as he went along in his book. But I think the travel and the exposure to, going to some place in the middle of like northern India in some remote village where people were eating out of dirt pots, and it's like, maybe now I can check myself because I just ate the most delicious curry I've ever eaten in my life, or the best garam masala was made in front of me on a brick. So I think you realize that the pretension falls away. I think you become a better cook and a better chef by learning how to do it with a rusty, dull knife.
Well, and those people aren't cooking for anything. They're cooking for their family.
Yeah.
Right. And they're cooking for the village, or they're cooking for the town, and they're sharing recipes within itself. And so I think the beauty about his show is giving you Well, give you cause to go and check out some of these places, because it is easy to go to these places and find local foods if you're into it. It's a little tougher for me. I don't have the palate that that would probably that appreciate what I'm have exposure to.
Are you a full munch? Are you a full mungy cake when it comes to food?
I'm doing my best, man. I'm doing my best, but I have my moments, and I'm in Saudi Arabia right now, and I went walking through Riyadh today a little bit and had a few little samples of local stuff, and breakfast in the hotel is North Americanized, but there are some local dishes, and all the chefs are great, and they came over to me, and what do you want? And I said, bring me what do you think I should have locally, but I don't have the palate for super spice. Like I don't have a palate to be boiling my face off or anything like that.
Yeah,
Even I'm going to India
stuff.
in a couple of days, so I guess I'll have to figure out a way to do it. But the
do you like
idea,
vegetarian food?
I am. I am actually more vegetarian on the road than I am anywhere else, because
So then you're gonna fit right in India, because there's some of the best vegetarian dishes in the world come from India, and even carnivores like Gordon Ramsay will be the first to tell you where he would make fun of it, and he would knock them.
Yeah.
And then he did a special where he was traveling through India and he ate some of the best food he has ever eaten, where he says, I was completely wrong. My I'm thinking we're all just eating rabbit food rather than delicious Indian cuisine that is absolutely meatless, right? So sorry, go ahead.
I'm a big, I have to be, for health reasons. I just can't do 7 days in a row of meat. So I have an opportunity with having local catering in all the markets is to do that and have as much local and be as vegan as vegetarian as I want. I wouldn't go as far as saying I would be vegan on the road, but I'm definitely veggie on the road as much as I can be. And so Anthony's show became fascinating because to me, I was like, what? Where do you, how did you get into there and find that, and then taking these recipes and taking these things back and showing people it's two fantasies there. There's travel and food.
It was funny because he covered every corner of the planet when it came to culinary places. And I think it was a leapfrog approach where he would meet with somebody who knew somebody and then would refer next, and then they would refer somebody next, and that's how he kind of made his way around. Plus, his international, he was internationally known, right? So people were, I'm sure, offering, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't you go see my friend? He's an executive chef at some place in Real or so, wherever, he just go there, and he brought. It was his narrative. It was the way his storytelling was. And that's what really drew me in.
Yeah.
And I became a fan of his. And I actually emulate it when I do voiceover work, when I do creative writing for, right now, this project that we're doing for the Niagara Wine Festival. When you hear it, it's in the spirit of Anthony. You would be watching one of Anthony's shows. It didn't matter what show he did. It always had that same style. There was a bit of snark. There was a bit of dry humor and wit, but it was always interesting as hell. You always, you were like, wow, I didn't know that about that place, or I didn't know I understand why he's so passionate about going there now, and then you want to go, you want to do that. When Anthony died, I literally looked at my wife and I said, I need to be next. I need to be him. And if I can't be him in the same capacity, I'm going to try and I'm going to enjoy it, so.
And you make posts, and your food is always amazing and super, appealing on there. And I guess if you would benefit even more if you had an opportunity to travel more. My guess would be.
Oh yeah. For sure. I did that's the wrong. I was going to say, I'll pull it up. I did a post once because on crier.co, which is formerly the deanblundell.com website. I do all the food and beverage stuff on there, and I said I'm gonna write a post, and it's just gonna be about a burger. I'm just gonna write about a plain old burger, and it was the Diner Burger post, and it exploded because I wrote it as though it was a narrative from that show, where he would, because if you ever watch his show, he was great at because he only be, especially the show, he did that one called The Layover,
Yeah.
And he could only be in so many places in a certain amount of time. So he would go to where he wanted to be, but he would send 2 other crews out to go and visit other places and then narrate what was going on in those places. So I wanted to do it in the style of that side narration where he was in a greasy diner where and describes the burger where you can actually, while you're watching, you can smell it. Like you can, like your nose, just your brain plays fun tricks on you when it comes to food, right? And when it's described to you properly and methodically, and it's almost like he dug into your brain and rewired it so that you could smell-o-vision before it was a thing, right? So, yeah,
I like him to like a Steinbeck as an author. But like an author on words. Like you could go to a place with Steinbeck where he would explain, in A Time to Kill, or not A Time to Kill. Lenny with the Rabbits. Of Mice and Men.
Mice and Men. Yeah.
He would explain. The open fields, but then just how he ended up breaking it down. And Bourdain was a bit like that, where it's like,
you could taste the salt in the air.
You could taste it in the air.
Yeah.
And he was great. And I think that's the mastery of those people that can tap into that. Yep. But I think it was the curiosity of like, how did he get there? And like, it's always easier to do these things when you have a show and you're starting to make money and you can get paid to travel to do things. But I did the same thing with coffee. That's what started me on on the Dean Blundell network, was my search for coffee.
The best coffee.
Well, they're like, you need to find all the best coffee in the world. And I'm like, I'm doing that. You need to talk about it in a podcast. I'm like, no one wants to hear that. Speaking of putting people to sleep, I can't do 200 episodes of coffee, but it ended up actually planting a really good foundation for me, because I actually legit was finding all these best coffee joints in the world. Yeah. And what's happened now, not to get too far off here, but because, sticking with that Bourdain theme, and it's funny that you bring him up, because I was thinking about him today, because someone was talking to me about a certain coffee here in Saudi Arabia that's made with sand, like boiled sand. Like you take there's a whole process about how they do it, and it's very famous for this region. And I'm like, that's a full-on Bourdain discovery, to be able to put, and I'm transferring my old YouTube page over to more of this kind of travel discovery phase of things.
Yeah.
And it's totally rooted in that Bourdain-ness of like trying to find things in deep markets that no one else could possibly find, but might be the best drink or best coffee I've ever had or experienced, So,
yeah. So so you tried it? Did you try the sand?
We couldn't find it. We couldn't find it, and a couple of people were telling me today that it is cold here right now. So they're like, it's more of a hot thing because it boils for like a long time, and there's something about the process to making it, like it takes 6 months to make it.
Holy.
Yeah, it's
wow,
a whole.
Are you serious?
It's a whole thing. So by the time you go to drink it, they've already been making it for 6 months.
Okay.
So apparently I'm still on a mission to find it even tomorrow, and try to document it in some capacity if I can. But I've got Abu Dhabi coming up and a few other places, so maybe I'll be able to find that in those areas. But it definitely is Bourdain inspired.
Yeah. It's one of those, you never would see yourself doing it on, like, obviously without a television show, but I could see doing it. I can see him doing it where he would just show up, meet somebody that says, hey, my mom makes the best whatever, insert dish here. And he's like, take me to your house, take me to your mom's house, let's cook. And ends up in that kitchen. I think that's the variety, and that's the spice. That's what you need to see to overcome a lot of like those baked in stereotypes that you have of certain cultures, that you have of certain people. And travel and experience in immersive experience in a culture is the cure to what ails you, like when it comes to that kind of issue. And we're seeing a lot of it now. Like we've never been so divided as a society when it comes to that sort of thing. And Anthony Bourdain was the guy that would put all that aside
Sure.
He would go to Russia and hang out. That one guy that he used to do all of his Russian or Baltic things with, that he was so funny, but it was just to break down certain stereotypes. Sure, Putin's governments.
But people need to see that. I just had this discussion today on with Army Chris and those guys, and you guys can check out the Army Chris show and Eager Beaver on the network. But they were talking about travel and a few things, and I had to say, everyone's the same around the world. Everyone's exactly the same. You can remove politics out of the equation, and this show is not political by any means, but the idea is that we're all the same. We all want to, try great food. We all want to take the kids to the park. We all just want to make a living. And if you have an opportunity to travel for work like me, great. Work towards it. It's one of the best, most rewarding things you could possibly do. Has its cons. You're away a lot, all the rest of it. But you get to experience this food, coffee, and people all around the world. And I'm in one of the most polarizing countries in the world right now, in Saudi Arabia. I've never felt safer in my life, and everyone's been wonderful.
Right. And that being said, of course, there are a lot of social issues that are ongoing where you are. So we come from a point of, and I say this from I don't think a white American woman would have been able to do what Anthony Bourdain did in a lot of places that he went, so
fair enough.
We come from a point of ignorant privilege that we are lucky to have, but at the same time we recognize that we have it, so and I think that was one of his big things, was to try and smash that, even if it was just him talking to somebody that believed in that sort of and again, I don't want to get political either, but getting that sort of mindset out of their minds, like, say, listen, it could be better. Just love everybody, just feed them, have a good time. And he was great at connecting with people. It didn't matter who they were. It didn't even matter if he could speak their language, if he had an interpreter with him. Even that, you could see the people just hanging off of him in a conversation, because even through an interpreter, because of how expressive he was and how he was able to deliver what he was telling you. He could be handing down a sentence of a life sentence in prison to somebody, and they'd be like, "Wow, thanks, Anthony."
It's like getting bad news from an Aussie. Like if someone's giving me bad news, I want it from an Australian right away.
Morgan Freeman.
Right? It's like, I want an Australian coming up to me going, all right, well, that was great, but you don't have much time left now, do you? Like, right? And you're like, okay, sure.
That sounds happy, right?
Right.
It sounds like a good time. So
what's his legacy then as a cook overall? You've got your Ramses and your Jamies of the world, and they all seem to get along, and there's a bit of competition and who has the best show. But what's his legacy overall as a chef, a cook, or is he more, is it the TV thing and what he brought to the people in that way?
No, a lot of people don't realize what an actual accomplished chef he actually was, and what a great cook he was. And he always referred to himself as a cook. He never referred to himself as a chef, even when somebody would call him chef. He's I'm just a cook. I'm just a cook. But you look at his best friend, Eric Repair. And you would watch them cook together in certain, they would do special things here and there where both of them would be cooking, and Eric would be blown away because you're right, you don't think Anthony Bourdain, cook, chef. You think Anthony Bourdain, world eater, and he was just smart about the food, but he was an accomplished chef. His legacy, I think, is the marriage of the two, the travel and the culinary discoveries that he made along the way, which he probably didn't really discover himself. He knew about, but he wanted to show you, and he had a way about it. Again, I can't say it enough, that was inspiring to a lot of people, a lot of chefs. My brother-in-law is a Red Seal certified chef because of Anthony Bourdain. And yeah, that happened before, Ashley and I were married, and it was a neat thing. It was like, oh, you love that guy too? Because he's my dude. He goes, you think he's your dude? I'm in this job because of him, So it's I don't think he realized it. I don't think he realized just how powerful of an influence on people, culture, mindsets he really was. And it's a real shame. And it all goes back to certain mental health things. The industry is absolutely abhorrent when it comes to drug use, addiction problems. It's a hotbed for that.
The cooking industry or the travel industry.
I don't know about travel. I don't want to speak on that one. I mean about cooking. I'm sure travel would have its moments as well, and especially in the industry that you're in.
Sure.
But
it's cleaned up a bunch since COVID, for sure.
I would imagine as much.
Yeah.
But kitchens have always been notorious for being hotbeds for addicts, just because it is it's almost it's like anybody that wants to get into it's a very sadomasochistic profession to want to get into, knowing full well what you're getting into. Like in Kitchen Confidential, where Anthony's first book, where he spelled it out. It was a chapter called A Day in the Life, and he mapped out his day from 4:00 in the morning, getting up, all the way right to the end to 10:00 at night, having a nightcap at a bar down the road from Leal.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Les Halles, as he says in the book, just because suppliers used to always send him the wrong food because they didn't know what restaurant he was coming from. But he would map it out, and you would think, who the hell wants to get into this? Who would do this voluntarily? Because once you get to like a sous or an executive level chef in a nice established place, sure, you're going to make some good money, but you're going to put the hours in. It's going to take you decades to get to that plot. And it's all about the passion. It's all about the food. It's all about that fairy tale, that weird, it's almost fictional. Like when you think about it, everybody thinks they're going to be the next Anthony Bourdain or the next Gordon Ramsay or the next, Eric Ripert or whoever, like you're going to be the next owner of the French Laundry in Napa Valley. Like it's, you just don't see any other way around it. And I think that's the drive that keeps people in it. And I find that inspiring as well. I think that that's a dreamer. That's an adult with a dream. It's hard to find adults that have dreams, and when you can really tangibly try and get an attainable goal like that and be as passionate about it as you are without burning out, spinning out into a gutter and becoming a heroin addict like he did. Luckily pulled himself out, didn't fix all the problems, but
clearly,
it was one of those things. So it's an inspiring thing. So,
well, his legacy lives on. I definitely try to emulate him to the standpoint of trying to find all the best coffee in the world. It's a very random thing to do.
I love it.
But I also take pictures of manholes in every manhole covers in every city.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a different podcast. Like a thing.
No, no, that's Lachlan Cross's new show. But just unique things about travel, and that's one of the things that I pulled in. I'm like, I'll never have a show like him or anything like that, but if I can do 5-minute hits where somebody has visited a coffee shop that I recommended that they go see, then great, mission accomplished. And I think by your writing and what you're posting on the network and the rest of it, if someone, I'm sure, sends you a pic on Twitter or whatever they do, and they tag you and saying, hey Ryan, I grabbed your recipe and I listened to your soothing voice talk about it or write about it, and here's what it looks like. Because TikTok,
I get it all the time. I do get it all the time,
and that's got to be a hell of a feeling. So it's like,
neat. It's weird. It's actually, I become very, it's almost self-conscious. It's like, oh man, I really hope it was good. I really hope I hope you're just not being polite. It's weird. It is a weird feeling when you see somebody do something that you created.
Sure.
It's almost like I liken it to a singer on a stage and the crowd sings back at them. That's got to be like a similar feeling where it's like, this is must get weird. Like it's got to be weird for everybody at first, but then really cool at the end.
So given all the travels and the places that he's been and the food that he's eaten and the recipes he's put up and all the rest of it, is there a favorite of his? Have you tried it? Will you try it and put it up for the reader and the listener to check out? Because all the stuff you put up so far looks very tasty, and I'm curious if you're gonna keep going down that path.
And it's a daunting one, and I don't even know if I'm sure there's something by him that I could probably find, but his favorite dish was always pho or pho.
Yeah, pho.
Yeah,
got it.
He was a huge proponent of anything from Vietnam, and it was a Vietnamese it was like Hanoi pho, which was just it was the episode with him and Barack Obama where he ran into Barack Obama overseas, and they sat down in a little faux shop. Like it was like a plastic spoons, milk crate seats kind of joint, and just the sounds of the kitchen, the sounds of the street, the sound, like you could smell. This is what I was talking about earlier, where you can smell things through the screen, and you could smell that bowl that they were eating from. And I've always wanted to try, because I'm a huge fan. Like we have so many joints around here that serve it so well. And I've always wanted to try to make it from scratch, where like even the broth, like making a bone broth and doing like the steps that you need to do to get to that. And I think if I could do it any sort of justice, it would be a bit of a thumbs up for old Tony. And and just knowing that I'm just another guy, just another person that he actually he touched with that enthusiasm. So stay tuned. Watch out on crier.co. Maybe we'll do that this spring. It's a good hot meal for cold days. So February's coming. Let's warm it up with some pho.
Hope you're drifting off, friends. That's the Dude Did Will Sunday Night Storytime, a story about Anthony Bourdain, brought to us from my guest Ryan of the Lindz Report. He's also the food and beverage director, writer. Any other title you want to throw in there?
Co-host podcast. They actually, if you look at my bio on the website, they called me the Swiss Army knife of the network.
There you go.
Technical producer, creative writer. I just kind of do everything here. So, but food and beverage is my passion. That's what I do. That's what Tony did, and I will keep going with it. And thanks
make
for
sure
having
you
me.
tune in anytime. Sunday Night Storytime on the Crier Media Network. Wraps for another night, and now I'm hungry. Night, friends. Get
Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried.
I had to.
They're awake now.
Thanks, pal.